Alright, starting up on our trig section in Algebra 2, we are looking at just kind of basic stuff with our angles and our unit circle that we have. There is going to be something that you're going to want to write out at the end, towards the end of this video, which I'll let you know. So first thing is our angles and where they are in standard position. So if you think of a normal coordinate plane, the x-axis on the positive side would be called your initial side. Okay, that's kind of like where our angles always start. And then the arm that ends up swinging around and swinging open is called our terminal side. So the side that's not going to be along that x-axis on the positive side, that's called our terminal side. Okay, and that is in standard position. So standard position is going to start and it opens up through the first quadrant and then into the second quadrant and then onto the third and the fourth. Okay, so that's how it opens. It opens in a counterclockwise motion because that's just how they are. Okay, and it always does. Okay, so take a second and find the measure of the green part. Okay, so find the measure of the green part. Okay, so the first one, if with the green part, we end up taking 90 degrees and then we have 25 more. So it's 90 plus 25 ends up making it 115 degrees. Okay, so that first one would end up being 115 degrees because it's 90 degrees plus the 25 degrees. Okay. Okay, so now the next one, this one's open in a counterclock or in a clockwise motion. So take a second and find the measure of the second one. So the measure of the second one ends up being a negative 40 degrees because it is opening in a clockwise motion. So because it's opening this direction, it ends up being negative. So it opens clockwise, it's negative. If it opens counterclockwise, it's positive. Okay, and again, 90, if it's 25, or 50, you subtract 50 from 90, get you a negative 40. So opens that way, if it opens counterclockwise, they're going to be positive. If they're opening clockwise, they are negative. Okay, which is again stated here, positive and negative angles. Again, if it opens counterclockwise, it's positive. If it opens clockwise, it is negative. Okay. All right, so this is our unit circle. Okay, this is something that's very important. So what a unit circle is it's a circle with a radius of 1. And then these are the values on a coordinate plane if you were to graph it on there. So starting here, the inside circle or the inside numbers are all the degrees. The next one out are called radians. And the next one out are the values, so the x and y values at each point. So at 0 degrees, what we have is we have a 1, 0. Okay. At 30 degrees, our point is root 3 over 2, 1/2. 45 degrees is root 2 over 2, root 2 over 2, so on and so forth, going all the way around the circle, opening in a positive direction. Okay. One thing you'll notice with all these numbers is that they are less than 1, or they're between -1 and 1. Okay. So that's your degrees and radians. We're going to talk about radians and what they are in a next section, but this is our unit circle. Okay. Now, with a unit circle, okay, we have our sine and our cosine values. So if you try to remember back from when we learned about sine and cosine in geometry and some algebra 1, so sine, cosine, tangent. Okay, so sine and cosine are two big ones. So cosine and sine are on those unit circles. The cosine is the x values at a certain angle. The sine is the y values. Way to help you memorize, or way to help you remember it, is that it's alphabetical. C comes before S, just like Y comes before, or X comes before Y. So the cosines are always the X values, the sines are always the Y values. Okay, so if we look at the following, we have cosine of 120 and sine of 45. So cosine of 120, looking back here, we would go to 120 degrees and we'd look for our cosine value. Well, our cosine is our X value, which means that our cosine would end up being -1/2. So the cosine of 120 would end up being -1/2. Our other one was sine of 45. So we go to 45 degrees and we end up with our y value for our sine, okay, so which is root 2 over 2. Okay, so we end up negative 1/2 and root 2 over 2. Okay, so that's how we read our sine and cosines and everything. So again, here's our unit circle. Okay, there is two things I want to mention. Number one is that you want to copy this unit circle down to have in your notes somehow. Okay, you want to have all the x and the y values, the degrees and radians, because you can use it as a reference to help you answer different problems. Because if I'm asking you what's the sine of, let's say, 130 degrees, you need to give me the exact answer of root 2 over 2. I do not want the decimal. I want the exact answer because they're all right there. Okay. Another thing is that, let's say I want to find the degree, let's say the sine of 405 degrees, right? 405? Yeah, 405 degrees. So I want to find the sine of 405 degrees. Now, if you look at this unit circle, it only goes up to 360 degrees. But after that, the circle repeats itself. So if you're more than 360, what you're going to do with your degree is that you're going to subtract 360 out of it, okay, to see what you get. I get 45, so that means that the sine of 405 is the same as the sine of 45, which is root 2 over 2. Okay, and that's going to end up being it. So remember, the cosine is the y, the sine is the x values for those. All right? Okay, so that's the end of this first section of trig.